Gather round, weekend warriors. Today I'm going to show you how to turn this pile of rough sawn timber into a triple XL picnic table that stood up to all the abuse my brother's 21st could throw at it. I'll be doing it the hard way too. You won't find any of that nice straight furniture grade timber on this job. I've gone and picked up a marketplace bargain. It's Western stringy, but I've got a sneaking suspicion it must be some kind of banana tree hybrid, because this stuff is more bowed than John Wayne's legs after a big day riding donkeys. After giving these lengths the old eye test, I lay them down so the joints are as pretty as they can be. Then, for my own amusement, I run a chalky down to see how bad they are. I doubt even Bob Ross would have something nice to say about these, but on we march. There's a little knot at the end of this board, so I'll give it a quick tidy up before moving on. It's about here somewhere that I regret buying a Makita track saw and wish I got a Festool one instead. Not an ad. She'll be right though, I'll tidy it up with the planer. And have a go at that, like it bloody grew there. Next up, I'll flick a couple of lines either side to see which boards are least bowed and if they're close enough to being parallel. And wouldn't you know it, we've just jagged a win. To celebrate, grab your builder square and mark your cut-off lines, then get to chopping. Unlike me track saw, who I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with, I rate this circ saw. Thing's a weapon. I've had it since I was a second year and it just keeps on keeping on. After you got all your ends cut, check your work with a nice straight edge, then move on to the other side, and repeat the process. Once you've made the cuts from either end and lined the boards up with your straight edge, make a couple of marks 100mm from either end and join them with your straight edge. After that, grab a couple of 3-inch nails and put them between each board where they're touching so we've got some space for a bit of expansion, as well as a gap for you to drip schooner spillage onto your mate's knees. And if you're someone who can afford some of that fancy straight timber, you can just put your nails in either end, so that it looks something like this. With those lines we drew a minute ago, take some measurements to knock about 40mm off, or somewhere between 1.5 inches and 1.75 inches if you're using freedom units. That whole system makes no sense to me. Yanks will use just about anything aside from the metric system. I'm also going to make a 45-degree cut about 10mm or half an inch down from the top so there's less meat for you to ram your knee into when you sit down. Once you've got all that rolled, set them on the lines we marked earlier, clamp them down and screw the bludgers in. Because I'm using hardwood, I'm pre-drilling and countersinking my fixings. I've chosen 14-gauge batten screws for today because they're quick to install and bloody strong. As for the timber I'm using, the majority of the project's green, rough-sawn western stringy bark, a locally milled Aussie hardwood. I've picked it because it was relatively cheap and available today, which was essential because my brother's 21st is tomorrow. For those wondering, seasoned or kiln-dried timber is preferred over green or unseasoned timber because it's more stable and less likely to warp, twist and shrink over time. But I've been feeling a bit rogue and interested to see how much green timber really does misbehave as it dries, to keep it in mind for any future projects. Once the table's been hanging around for a while and the moisture content drops off a bit, assuming it doesn't carry on too much, I'll flatten the surface, sand it down, profile the edges and give it some oil. Now that the outside couple of supports are fixed down, I'll find the centre of the tabletop and mark a line and measure for the middle one. If you're using straight timber, they should be all the same, but I'm not, so mine aren't. Once the centre one's installed, I'll repeat the process and split the span on both sides again, using my builder square to make sure both are square off the line I flicked earlier, which is super important because they're what the legs of this beast are going to be anchored to. Just wanted to take a quick sec to say cheers to everyone who's watching and subscribe to the page. I've got so many projects I want to share with the world, and that's only possible if people keep watching and a whole stack of new people follow along. So if there's something you guys think I can be doing better or you want to see more of, drop it down in the comments and I'll be sure to take it on board. For those who have been waiting on the next video in the Farmstead series, the next episode should be up next week, assuming my laptop doesn't die on me again. So keep an eye out for that. And once again, thanks for being here. Righto, next part of the plan of attack is to cut and install the legs. Height-wise, I'm fairly long, and I absolutely hate how most tables and chairs are made for people who can't even reach the top shelf. So if you're a short king, you're going to want to knock a bit off the leg length here. I'm a fanny fur over 6 foot, so I'm making mine 1 metre from long point to short point with a 30-degree bevel. Or in freedom units, I don't know, it's probably something like 1 yard and a bit. Google it or something, this is your problem. As for the install location, I decided to put the legs at the start of the second board in, and that worked really well in the end, so I'd recommend going with that. Because this table's so big and heavy, I wanted to make sure the legs are really secure, so I've opted for 300mm batten screws for each leg, although I'll only put 2 in each until I get them all squared up. Once they're in though, grab a level and mark a line from the edge of the tabletop down the leg. Then, measure from the top of the table up that line 300mm. Do that to both sides, then square it across with your level. And that'll be the line that gives you the location for the bench support. I'd recommend getting an extra pair of hands to help with the legs install, because it was a bit tricky trying to keep them in place by myself. She's starting to look like a table now. Next step's to cut and install the support for the bench seats. Get ready for this because there's some maths involved. Grab your tape and measure across 2 boards from your tabletop. For me, that was 305mm. Then add 100mm to that, giving me 405. Times it by 2, giving me 810. Now we have how much overhang's needed for the bench seats. Then all we got to do is add the distance of the horizontal line we just marked, for me 800, and you've got your support length, 1610 overall. And that should work for everyone using 150mm wide boards with a 5mm gap. I know it was pretty confusing, so if you want me to do a specific tutorial on just that part, let me know down below and I'll see if I can't get it done for you. As for the install, mark the top of the support 405 from each end, and those marks should line up nicely with the intersecting point of the vertical and horizontal lines we marked a minute ago. I cut a 60-degree angle on the end of those timbers just so that there's nothing to smash your shin on as you walk past. And to make sure nothing falls apart, I've gone with 4 fixings into each leg. Next up, I'm installing some bracing to stop the table racking back and forth when it's bumped into or used. All I've done here is got an offcut and jammed it against the bench seat support, and I'm tapping it down until it touches my square, which is on a mark that I've made 35mm away from the table leg, the thickness of my timber. Once that's all sorted, I've just taken the rubber stopper out of the end of my level and sat it on the top corner of the table leg, where I'll grab a protractor to find the angle of the cut. 23 degrees here, but yours will be different if your table's a different length to mine. Then I just screw it off and do the other side. Sorry for the lousy angle, I obviously wasn't thinking where I had my phone in relation to where I was working. You'll see it way better when I do the other side. Just the same process here, mark the underside of the table, the thickness of my bench support away, jammed an offcut in and tap it with the hammer until it's in the right place. Measure the brace, following that up with my level and the protractor to get the angle. It's the same as the other side, which it should be. Now I'm just finding the centre, then I just got to cut and install the brace. As you can tell, I've paid a bit better attention as to where my phone is in relation to where I'm working this time. That's most of the hard work done. We're on the downhill stretch now. Enjoy watching me bust my ring to flip this heavy bludger over before I give up and wait for the birthday boy to come and give me a lift. After a quick test run, we decide it's a great height, but we reckon it needs some extra bracing at the end. There's probably going to be people dancing on it at the party. I quickly measure them up and decide they'll be easier to install flipped up the other way once the bench seats have been installed. After a quick dimension check, I'll hook into cutting the benches to length and getting them screwed in. I got the positioning of the seats by plumbing down the straight edge at the end of the table. It was about here that I realised it's getting late in the evening, the sun's starting to go down, people coming from a distance for the party are starting to roll in, and I am tonguing for a beer. Once they were all screwed off, I figured I'd better go up the chain of screaming and consult the Commander-in-Chief along with his Minister of War and Finances. I got him over to give the table a test run and see what they thought. After some deliberation, I've been given the all clear. So I got a hand to flip the table back onto its lid and screw off the last couple of braces before parking up for a well-earned warm-up stubby. The next morning, I employed the help of my cousin, along with a couple of cold ones, to throw a couple of stiffeners into the bench to stop the timbers flexing separately and pinching people on the bum. And that's it, job done. Check out the finished product. It's 3.8 metres long and solid as a rock. Stood up to all the abuse that we could throw at it on the 21st, including plenty of people dancing on top of it. Not only that, but as you're about to find out, it exceeded seating expectations by being able to accommodate 16 fully grown Aussie backsides without even groaning. Thanks everyone for watching, and remember, here's some advice for a 21st. You can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning. Cheers.